Okay, so we're going to start off with the first of the wines, and that is the GPS Kershaw GPS Chardonnay. Or to give a little bit of background, the GPS range, for those familiar with the Kershaw wines, has a green stripe on it, and that stripe basically denotes that it's not a wine from Elgin. It's a wine from outside the region. So we have three different wines. Each of them I'll give some explanation, but to just sum up, the wines are not from Elgin, but they are from interesting and unusual parcels that I've come across over my last few years, and found that these actually could make something of outstanding quality, but don't fit into the Elgin kind of group, which I make under the, as I mentioned, under the blue label. So these come from vineyards called the Lower Davenhawks River. Interestingly, it's part of the Cape South Coast, which I should add is also where all the GPS come from. So they come from the greater Cape South Coast area, and it actually signifies a great positioning system. You'll see Lower Davenhawks, but you won't see that in any bottle, as to my knowledge, in this country, in fact anywhere in the world, because Lower Davenhawks River only refers to this particular vineyard, and the vineyard owners that I buy the grapes from don't actually use that decal on their labels. They use rather Cape South Coast. And why is this special? What made it so special? Well, as we may know from the majority of wines, in fact, or almost 99% of all the wines that we make in South Africa, they come from not just the Western Cape or Northern Cape, but they come from decomposed soils. Those soils generally are incredibly old, ranging up from 100 million years to sort of 500,000 years for your granitic-based soils, up to 1 billion years for your sandstone-based soils. Interestingly, that compares to very young soils relatively in, say, France, where your sort of Chevresian chalks really are only about 10 to 15 million years old, and a lot of them have some form of fossilized soils where the seabed the soils was at one point a seabed and has now risen up to form a sort of soil base with oyster shells or other fossilized things such as chalk and limestone. We don't get those sorts of soils at all because our soils are just that much older. However, there are pockets as you drive further to the east, and when you are a good 4 or 5 hours away from Cape Town and quite close to Mossel Bay, that you start to see little pockets of some of these more interesting soils. This one in particular is on limestone, and is a small little, I suppose, outcrop of limestone where we can grow this. And to put that into perspective, these are the wines that will give you a different textural feel. They'll give a little bit more grip to the mid palate. They tend to not just accentuate the fruit which you get on the other soils, but they just give a little bit of a difference to how the makeup is. It's hard to describe in one word, but important to taste it in another word, so do taste it. I won't get too much more into detail about how they're made because, as I mentioned in the introduction, they are all made in a natural way, so we don't add anything to these wines apart from sulfites, which we use to preserve the wine for a longer period. So this would be whole batch pressed, goes to certain barrels, I can explain again a bit later, and these barrels are then turned, usually left in for about 10 to 12 months depending on the year, and then they are assembled. As it happens, this is one clone, it's clone 95, but that wasn't purposeful, it was just the fact that this particular parcel is only on one clone.